you somewhere from deep in the heart of Texas. Once again, it's me, Honey Ann. Hi. Hope everybody's doing well today. So, um, we've been talking about the song. Let's look at three important factors about healthy relationships. Looking through the Song of Songs and what it teaches us about relationships and sex. So, this afternoon, we'll continue in our look through the Song of Songs. Just in way of review for those who didn't hear what I said yesterday or didn't tune in, Solomon lives in the 10th century. He's the richest king in Israel's history. And he's out looking over his vineyards and he meets this country girl. Sorry, I've got distractions. Her name is Shulamith. She captures the king's heart. For some time, the king pursues her and makes periodic visits to see her. And Solomon asks her to marry him. And Shulamith gives serious consideration and then she accepts. So we learned about the concept of attraction. Okay, just a minute. Okay, just a minute. So now let's look at the path that they took, before they became married. Okay, there was this man who came to this village, and he sat down with the villagers by the river and began to eat. And when all of a sudden this large crocodile came out of the water, and he just bit his arm off. And the man was horrified, along with the villagers. And they gave him aid, but then they went about their business, and they didn't talk about it. The man was very upset, and people didn't talk about it at all. Try to resolve the problem. Well, he found out that the tribe thought that it was impolite to talk about such matters. Mhm. And he also noticed that when people in the village were missing fingers, toes, hands, feet, and some had even died, but the tribe refused to talk about such matters, even though there was so much destruction taking place. It was impolite to talk about those matters. Wow. So different from today. Mhm. Hey, hang on, I'm going to get off camera. Okay, just a minute. So with sex, we don't talk about it in church or in the community. I mean, we don't talk about it at home or at school. People have been really hurt, wounded, and devastated, but the churches and the communities and the schools, they refuse to talk about it because it's not polite. You know, even though we have in the Bible the Song of Songs, the Song of Songs, the Songs of Solomon. Now we've watched how they met and how they courted. And we looked at very important concepts: attraction, self-image, traits of a solid relationship. And today we're going to witness the wedding, the path of becoming one. 3:1-4. Excuse me, 3:1 and 4:4. So there was a frightening dream she had. So she has made some wonderful times with Solomon, and some major decisions had to go. She had to make major decisions in her life. Now, in her dream, there's this painful longing to be with her loved one. This recurrent dream of what life would be like if she married Solomon. Now, the dream reveals a nagging uncertainty as to whether she would be happy with the king, whose time would be occupied with the affairs of state and who would often be away, like on business. So she wants to marry Solomon and live in Jerusalem, but she's not sure that she's going to be happy away from her mother's home in the countryside. So she wants the best of both worlds, basically. She wants to have her cake and eat it too. And then we have our walk with God in comparison. It has the same struggles. Remember, in the very beginning of this yesterday, we could look at two humans in a relationship, Solomon and Shunammite. But we can also look at this allegorically speaking, where we're the bride and God is the groom. Just as Shulamith wanted the best of both worlds, so do we as Christians. There's this concept of counting the cost to follow Christ. We pay the cost to follow the boss. Christianity is far more than just saying a few words at the altar or going to church or contending in the community. It's a lifestyle where you're not your own person. You belong to Christ Jesus. He has purchased you by his very own blood. The Apostle Peter seems to be doing great things for God. Then at other times, failing miserably. Now, Peter remembered he denied the Lord 3 times just after he was, blowing and going that he would die for him. And Jesus gets killed, and over a period of time, Peter goes right back to what he was doing before, fishing. Then Jesus comes to visit Peter to reinstate him. And Jesus tells him, to feed his sheep. Then he goes on to say in John 21, I tell you the truth, when you were younger, you went wherever you wanted. But when you're old, you're going to stretch out your hand and someone else is going to dress you and lead you where you don't want to go. So what Jesus was trying to say is to be a true follower of Christ. You have to follow and do things that you don't always want to do, to be a true follower of him. Now, Shulamith, she realized her whole life was about to change if she was going to marry Solomon. Then she decides to marry Solomon, so she says yes. Now, before I talk about the wedding day, let's take note of verse 5. Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. This is twice now we've seen this thought. Chapter 2, verse 7, I believe, also talked about it. So the idea of restraint every time that there are passions, their passions increase, their holiness holds them back, and their faithfulness to God will be renewed. And God will reward you for your faithfulness to him. So now here comes the wedding day, the wedding procession. Some of the language used in Israel's Exodus journey, the explanation on verse 6 here. Coming from Desert Live, a column of smoke. Who was a column of smoke to the children of Israel. It was God. Now, I'm not inferring that men are gods, whether it's the idea of the holiness, perfume with myrrh and incense, picture of sweetness. That's how they described her. Mhm. Now, the concept that this wedding is holy and sweet is an exciting celebration. 7 and 8, verses 7 and 8. So there's this carriage basically, and it's like a traveling couch, and it's got these poles where it's carried on human shoulders. It's a carriage. Now, the groomsmen, we have 60 warriors to protect the bride. So imagine having groomsmen standing at your wedding, 357 Magnum strapped to their side. The idea is the man is going to be the one to protect her in the marriage, and the woman is going to be safe. Safety and security to women was very important. So let's explain verse 9. The carriage was made as wood from Lebanon. So it's the idea of strength and many strong. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay, just a minute. I'll tell you what. Okay, so back to where I was. Okay, so when it comes to people of God, they can be creative and zealous and ambitious. And when it comes to men, sometimes they're not very creative at home. Women get mad, because men are so uncreative, so they don't have the creative ability. They want a man with good character who can lead. So he's majestic, he's mine. She wants all the women of the world to look at him and see him because she's so proud to have that man in her life. So to the men, is your wife proud of you? If not, I encourage you that she can be, right? Then here comes the wedding night. The bridal chamber in the culture of that day, you'd get married and have the celebration. And right after the marriage, the couple would go off into the chamber, to the room, and consummate the marriage while the party's still going on. And then when they were done, they would come back and resume the party. So they're in the bridal chamber, and here's what Solomon says. She walks in, he looks in her eyes, and compares them to beautiful doves. It represents purity and being sweet. And he lifts the veil, touching her hair. He says, like a flock of goats from Gilead. Black goats with long hair, and this lamb was the very best. He was talking about her hair, how beautiful her hair was. And then he proceeds to talk about her teeth and her lips and her neck. So here's a concept that Solomon's doing. It may be foreign to some men, but the concept of romance, if you notice, he hasn't put a hand on her sexually, but romantically, he's really romancing her. Romance came from the Roman days. That was common language. And it became really widespread. So that language was put into like marriage lessons. And there's a less formal Latin, which is a common man's Latin. And that language is passionate and romantic. So the term romantic was talking about something that's not really formal, but more passionate, like love. And that's what we mean today by romance. When we get married and we get a certificate of marriage, it's legal or formal, showing that you're married. Mm-hmm. They have duties and requirements of the men were to make money and support the wife and take care of her until death. Being romantic, it's far more, it's like passionate and it comes from your heart. So what drives a woman crazy in marriage? To have a legal document with her and a husband who can't express deep down, romantically how he feels. Romance also includes the element of the unexpected. Anything Solomon all throughout this letter, he does things that are very unexpected. So anything that repeats itself and becomes repetitive, it loses its romantic value. With romance, it includes like dating, and, when you plan the evening, and not ask, honey, what do you want to do? Arrange the babysitter, make all the plans and the activities, and then surprise her. The element of surprise. Go out alone. Be spontaneous. you know, right? Okay. So the book, basically, it's 8 chapters long, and it's taking a couple and giving you, 7 snapshots of their relationship. So just imagine a 3,000-year-old document. That if you can apply these concepts to your life, it won't only deepen your relationship with God, but your spouse and your friends. So Solomon, king of Israel, is out looking over his vineyards, when he meets that country girl, Shulamith. And she captures the king's heart. And for some time, the king pursues her, and then makes those periodic visits to see her. And then Solomon asks her to marry him, and Shulamith gives serious consideration, and she accepts. And some important concepts that we were looking at is attraction, your character, your servanthood, more important than your appearance. Relationships, they take time, and there needs to be respect. The will is more important than feelings. You have 3 factors of a healthy relationship: becoming one, the idea of counting the cost, and the path of becoming one. So, Solomon and Shulamith, they've gone through the wedding ceremony and now are in the bridal chamber. And Solomon, he's progressed to removing her veil and undressing her. And the first important factor of intimacy is romance. You know. So, the second important factor of intimacy is gentleness. I mean, how do you approach the sexuality, of your husband or wife? Your approach as you would 2 fawns of a gazelle, to take a picture, not as to, as a hunter going and blasting away, but as a photographer, slowly and gently. So the idea presented by Solomon is to move slowly and gently. The parameter you and your spouse share is up to both of you. So you learn to communicate. If you have trouble talking about things, write it down. And men, when it comes to intimacy, you guys have the tendency to try the same combination over and over again, like opening a safe. It worked before, or it'll work again. We're all different. In reality, the same old combination, it doesn't work all the time. Try something different. Generally speaking, men are easier to please when it comes to intimacy. While the women, we're slow initially, like a Volkswagen, but can easily outdistance the dragster, who would be a man in the long run. So, with men, in order to have deep intimacy, they have to be sensitive and patient and conscious of their approach. They need to approach their wives like they would the 2 fawns. And the third important factor of intimacy is that, it's exhilarating. Solomon's talking about having sex all night long with his wife. This is very passionate, And this is why Jewish boys were not to read this book until they were older. So years ago, young English women were told on their wedding night to just lay there and think of the queen, meaning you endure sex to have babies to fight for the empire. It was an early Christian teaching that original sin was sex. So this is why some view of sex as dirty or hidden evil. Now, this is not a biblical view. Just read the Song of Songs. And fourth important factor of intimacy is that it's frightening. Solomon calls her beautiful, no flaw in you. Remember a couple of chapters before, she tells him not to look at her because she is darkened by the sun. So for men, Solomon is teaching a very important point, and that is to speak blessings rather than curses. And all women, they tend to be self-conscious. We are very self-conscious of our bodies, and that's always something that we want changed. So fellows, the most painful thing you can do to us when you see us naked is to say something negative. I mean, she'll have trouble, and all of us will have trouble forgetting it, and it'll hinder our intimacy. And remember, when we talk about, you can read the Song of Songs either as Solomon or as Shulamith, individuals, or you can read it as an allegory of Christ and the church, where he is in the groom and we are the bride, where he's the groom and we're the bride. So what's the groom's view of the bride? Ephesians 5 tells us radiant church without stain or wrinkle or any other blemish, but holy and blameless. That's his view of us. So the fifth important factor of intimacy, marriage, with your spouse, you mesh your body's emotions and spirits, and you take your DNA and wrap it around her. He takes it around, wraps it around her DNA to produce life. So the idea, you first have to leave before you can leave. Genesis 2:24. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they will become one flesh. It puts it this way in 1 Corinthians 7:4. The wife's body does not belong to her alone, but also to her husband. In the same way, the husband's body does not belong to him alone, but also to his wife. So, husbands and wives, let me talk about a powerful weapon to destroy marriages and families. And that's basically depriving one of the partners of sexual fulfillment. Someone will get angry and then penalize the other partner of sexual fulfillment. So when you do this, let me tell you what you're doing. All you're doing is opening the door and inviting the devil in. When the enemy comes in, your marriage will be destroyed and your children will be scarred for life. And most importantly, your relationship with God will be in jeopardy. This weapon is born out of unforgiveness, bitterness, and revenge, and fueled by pride. And these are not the things of God, but the things of the devil. And the sixth important factor of intimacy is its sensuous. Sight is very important to a man. As one lady had written, wives, if your husband likes black, see-through lingerie, don't wear flannel pajamas to bed. You're not living in a nunnery. You're sleeping with a man. It gives two ideas under sensuous. How much more pleasing is your love than wine? Solomon is complimenting her on her skill of making love. Friends, learn the art of lovemaking. And smell is very important art of the Hebrew evening pleasure. It deals basically with touches and what kind of a kiss it is. France, they didn't become a country until the Treaty of Verdun in the 9th century AD. And this, predates a French kiss by 19 centuries. It's a Hebrew kiss. Kissing a person is meant to be frustrating because it's designed to lead to lovemaking, and that's the way you're built. So don't do it until you're married. Huh? Ba-dum-bum. So the seventh important factor of intimacy is it's holy. And the idea spoken of here in purity, is purity. In the garden or well is a poetic way of speaking about the woman's body, while a spring is speaking about a male body. So fellows, he has kept her a virgin. Marriage is for virgins. Be encouraged. The wonderful thing, about the Word of God isn't just because it gives you a standard. There is a person who died for the violation of it. And there's a Holy Spirit who can change your life to conform to it. And a Bible that can, you know, illuminate your way. The Bible helps you and you can be clean from this day on. And the eighth important factor of intimacy is to keep the little foxes out. Remember when we talked about the little foxes who came into the vineyards and ate the tiny buds, literally destroying the crop before it ever comes into harvest. So this vineyard has come to fruition. The crop is in full bloom. Now it's being harvested. I mean, you are a garden fountain as well as flowing water streaming down. The ninth important factor of intimacy is responsiveness. So Shulamith has mentioned twice before, do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. So ladies, what's the first words that she says to her husband? She's asking him to make love with her. It's the most erotic verse in the Bible. This woman has been cared for, loved, nurtured, and romanced. So whose garden is it? Let my lover come into my or his garden and taste its choice fruits. The idea here is that this woman is responsive, and ladies fulfilling lovemaking has more to do with how you respond than anything else. There's three things that bring excitement to a man. What he hears, no man on his honeymoon night is going to say, shh, honey, be quiet. Whatever you feel you need to tell him, there may be a lot of education you may have to teach your husband. And what he sees is exciting to a man when he sees, ladies invest in apparel that he will like, fragrance of your garment. And I'm sure, you have a standard issue nightie, that you sleep in, and it comes from, Moose Jaw, Alaska, and it's made of sealskin, and it's about, an inch thick, and you love it because it's warm and comfortable. The ladies invest in something a little more sexy. When a man feels, everything you do registers with him. Shulamith, she understood this even though she was a virgin. She was skilled in the use of cosmetics, perfumes, and apparel. You know, so ladies, if you long for your husband to be romantic, then do something about it. Spend a little more time in the art of intimacy to improve your skills, with cosmetics, perfume, apparel, being a skilled lover, and learn to respond. And the 10th important factor of intimacy is that it's nourishing. So, chapter 5:1, verb tense has changed past perfect. Their lovemaking is over. So Solomon speaks 9 times. He makes reference to mine or my, basically saying, I'm nourished on you. Are you feeling more today or not? Wait a second. Oh. Okay, I'm sorry. I keep having interruptions today. So, do you want to see what God thinks of these last complete lines? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and stop the broadcast and I'll pick up another time. Sorry about this. I've got too many interruptions going on today. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye bye.